do you think Trump can attract the non-white, the non-conservative voter as well because of the blunders of the Democrats?
I think on that score, Kamala has an advantage. She has a mixed non-white heritage. She can attract both South Asians and Hispanics and African Americans. So she has a genetic advantage. She also has the advantage of being a woman. She has been a prosecutor, an attorney. So it would be an interesting match, as the Democrats are saying, a prosecutor versus a felon, because Trump is formally convicted.
Some people are getting more worried in Europe, who are allies and security dependent on the US. And most importantly, Ukraine, which is heavily dependent on the US diplomatic and military support.
It reminds me of an old American song by Bob Dylan, Times That Are A-Changing.
Indeed.
So that resonates with these developments.
And the reaction from Moscow is already that any peace talks with Ukraine will not include the 4 territories that it has captured.
They are in a state of panic with Bangladeshi history, how this reserve quotas announced, I think in 1972 by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
Perhaps the current generation wants a more pragmatic, more fair, and more equitable share in opportunities and jobs, rather than giving a disproportionate share to those who created Bangladesh.
Correct. The continued tension and hostility of PTI against the current government, and especially focused against the armed forces and their leadership, is still on.
On one hand, you notice that PTI and their social media accounts continue to wage an information war against army.
Yes,
But on the other side, the narrative of its leadership is that we will not talk to the politicians, we'll talk only to the army or the establishment. Don't you think these, what they say and what they do are self-contradictory?
they are, and they can't even figure out what to do. With a fresh episode of The Weekend, I am Murtaza Solangi.
And I am Muhammad Ali.
Shahji, last week we discussed US presidential elections. By that time, things moved quite swiftly. Kamala Harris is now the unofficial nominee of Democratic Party, although President Biden formally announced that she will be his nominee. By August 7, formally, Democratic delegates have to nominate her. But as it looks, it's a slam dunk. The way she is going up, it looks like that she would be the formal nominee of Democratic Party. But quite a few things have happened in US presidential elections. I was just looking at the figures. There's a recent poll of Ipsos and Reuters. And for the first time, they have declared that Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump, who was leading before, when President Biden had not formally abandoned his campaign. So Kamala Harris 44 and Trump 42%. At the same time, Trump campaign is saying that, we are not ready for a debate with Kamala Harris yet, because Democratic Party has not formally nominated her. So that's why they are somehow backpedaling on this. What are your thoughts?
I think there are three factors which could be driving Trump's boosted confidence, and to some extent Kamala's relief as well. And the first one would be that number of foreign policy, economic policy, and immigration-related issues have raised concern in the middle class Americans, which I'm sure Trump wants to capitalize on. The second factor is that they do see the lack of confidence in the Democrat camp in Biden's political future as a, sort of a victory. And they do see Kamala, perhaps in their view, as an underdog who they can sort out easily. But I think for Kamala as well, the emergence of her as the preeminent and a popular and a well-funded candidate of Democrat camp has several interesting dynamics. The first one could be that her mixed background offers an incentive for the non-white voters to relate to her. Second, she, despite being the vice president, does not have to pay that high a political price for the political blunders made by Mr. Biden. And as you can already witness, she's trying to gradually distance herself from the decisions made by Biden in order to reduce the political cost of those decisions, and including the vocal, unprecedented support for Israel in the Gaza conflict. And I think the real constituency, as you know very well, we have witnessed US elections very closely in the US, is the swing vote of the non-white, non-Caucasian voters resident along the two coastlines. Because the heartland traditionally is conservative and trusts the conservative values and narrative of Republicans. But what's your perspective? Do you think Trump can attract the non-white, the non-conservative voter as well because of the blunders of the Democrats?
I think on that score, Kamala has an advantage. She is a child of an Indian descent, South Asian mother, and Jamaican African father. So she has a mixed non-white heritage. She can attract both South Asians and Hispanics and African Americans. So she has a genetic advantage. She also has the advantage of being a woman.
Yes.
This is the second woman who would be contesting as presidential candidate. Hillary Clinton was the trailblazer, but she's just banking on the same trail. So that's to her advantage. And her smile is infectious, as you see her all over the place, including Wisconsin. And as they say, she's killing them with her smile. She has been a prosecutor, an attorney. So it would be an interesting match, as the Democrats are saying a prosecutor versus a felon, because Trump is formally convicted. So I see a little bit uneasiness on the part of Trump campaign because they were somehow trying to target. So it's clear that Trump campaign was very comfortable targeting old Biden, who forgets things, who's not that present-minded. And all of a sudden, now they have Kamala Harris in front of them, who's younger, who's much more sharp, and now they have to deal with a new situation. And as I told you earlier, she is actually inching away and going up in terms of popularity. So that's a good challenge for them. They can backpedal as much as they want, but eventually Mr. Trump would have to confront and debate Ms. Kamala Harris, who's quite sharp. And we will see as the campaign goes forward. In terms of money-making exercise, she's way up and very fast. So we will see how this campaign goes on. But a lot of international policy issues are also getting inside this campaign, be it Ukraine war, be it Russia, be it China. And quite a few developments have been taking place on those fronts vis-a-vis Ukraine, Russia, China.
Exactly. And I think, Murtaza, the world is witnessing this interesting and intensifying election campaign with bated breath. And it is not inappropriate to say, like you pointed out in the last episode, that some people are smiling in Beijing and Moscow. But let me add, some people are getting more worried in Europe, who are allies and security dependent on the US. And most importantly, Ukraine, which is heavily dependent on the US diplomatic and military support. They have sent their foreign minister to seek Beijing's role in peace negotiations and resolving the conflict with Moscow. What do you make of that?
It reminds me of an old American song by Bob Dylan, Times That Are A-Changing.
Indeed.
So that resonates with these developments, as we just saw a Ukrainian foreign minister in Beijing and trying to, work out some kind of agreement with China playing a pivotal role in diffusing this crisis. Russia still says that they are not willing to go ahead for any negotiations with Ukrainian authorities till they have vacated those 4 zones that are now under control of Ukrainian government. But I think Ukrainians are also smart enough to see if Mr. Trump comes in White House, they would have no plan. So they are somehow trying to make alternate plans and actually have started working on those plans.
So when you look at the mood and the growing concern in Zelensky's mind regarding the perhaps less than enduring commitment of the US towards the Ukrainian war effort, I think it makes one feel that Ukraine is beginning to realize that the US security and diplomatic support is not eternal. And eventually, it will have to come to negotiation table with Moscow directly or indirectly. And that is how I see the sort of rushed visit of the Ukrainian foreign minister to Beijing seeking Chinese mediation and their good offices, considering their leverage over Moscow, is obviously far more significant than any other country. But I think it is very interesting that how the US domestic politics is affecting international security and conflicts around the world. Ukrainian leadership has recognized that they cannot expect Moscow to leave the areas and territories it has captured. And the reaction from Moscow is already that any peace talks with Ukraine will not include the 4 territories that it has captured. And they expect Ukraine not to become a member of NATO as the 2 most important starting points for any future negotiations. So I think the European and American support for the Ukrainian war effort seems to be weakening in this context. But also, I want your short comment on the recent statement by President Biden that the Gaza conflict needs to end. I mean, is it a change in their policy of long-standing military and diplomatic support of Israel, whose prime minister was warmly welcomed in the US Congress? Or is it also a consequence of the political cost that Biden administration has paid in their home constituency for supporting the Israeli war effort?
A short comment on Ukraine. It's clear that Ukrainians are in a state of tailspin. On one hand, you saw their foreign minister dashing in Beijing. On the other hand, you saw Zelensky making a call to Trump and trying to set up a meeting. So they are in a state of panic. When it comes to American policy on Palestine and Gaza and Israel, I'm not sure if Democratic Party and the Republican Party top leadership have any second thoughts or change of heart. But you can see a change of heart in American young people. That's reflected in that campus university protest. More and more young Americans are getting sick and tired of that old policy of United States of unqualified support to the state of Israel.
But I want you to briefly compare how does the political cost or supporting the war effort of Israel and Ukraine translates into US domestic politics. Despite 40,000 casualties, fatalities, in fact, in Gaza, Mr. Netanyahu receives a hero's welcome on the Hill. But in contrast, the security commitment of US towards a frontline ally at war with the emerging challenger at the international systemic level, Russia, is declining.
You saw the delayed response both from Europe and America in terms of defense support to Ukraine. So you already talked about some kind of fatigue. But when it comes to Netanyahu, while he was received by US Congress, there were many who were conspicuous by their absence, including former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and more importantly, the presidential candidate Kamala Harris. She chose to stay away from that. So you can see a little change of heart. We will see how this campaign goes forward. But when it comes to this unqualified, uncontested support to the state of Israel by United States of America, be it Republicans or Democrats, this policy is not sustainable. It will change. And reflecting this new emerging global order, the rise of China and their allies is an important factor because, as you just talked about Ukraine's foreign minister, just a couple of days back, you saw the warring factions of Palestinians, Hamas and Fatah and DFLP and PFLP and all those factions coming to Beijing to reconcile themselves. And earlier you saw Chinese role in reconciliation between even Iran and Saudi Arabia. So these are the new markers of new global order.
I think you mentioned three very important developments. So while you see a continued reliance on hard power directly or support for its allies in the Middle East, in terms of Israel and Ukraine, in contrast, you see China trying to use its soft power and diplomatic leverage to be seen as a peace builder in the emerging world order and trying to build bridges between regional competitors, whether it is in Middle East in the form of bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia together, and also in terms of the recent visit of Ukrainian foreign minister to China, but also bringing the Palestinian factions together. I think this is a different way of contesting American power, but in a nuanced, diplomatic manner. So let's see how it transpires and whether it actually is able to achieve anything sustainable and tangible. So what's our next topic, Murtaza?
Well, as we are discussing global issues, why not have a few minutes on the rising situation in Bangladesh,
Yes.
which is next door neighbor. Last week, as you saw, there were huge protests, curfew. More than, I think, 200 people
Yes.
have died, 1,000 injured on the issue of quota system, job quotas. Now it looks like the Bangladesh government has bowed and surrendered before the demands of the protesters. Even Supreme Court has suspended that thing. But it has a lot of linkages with Bangladeshi history, how this reserve quotas announced, I think, in 1972 by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and then those job quotas for people who fought for Bangladesh's liberation, what they call Mukti Jodhas, the freedom fighters, and how Hasina Wajid somehow brought up the reference of Razakars, the volunteers who fought against Bangladeshi liberation and supported Pakistani armed forces. When she mentioned that term, that those people who are protesting probably are on the side of Razakars, and that actually triggered this protest further. So now, that Syed Abu has become a symbol of resistance who fought against quotas. So it looks like that people don't want to live in history. The young people of Bangladesh, they said, okay, you fought for our liberation, that's fine, but we can't live under those shadows forever. We want equality. So somehow it looks like the crisis is somehow subsiding, but that's an important pointer that you can't live in history. You only live in present and you look forward to the future.
Very interesting analysis, Murtaza, but I think there are three aspects which also deserve reflection. First is as you rightly pointed out, the significance of history in politics, which is, I think, a very important feature of South Asian politics. We are not very pragmatic. We are very self-conscious, and our identities are historically constructed. But three factors. Number one, I think it reflects the transforming nature of identity politics of Bangladesh. It means that the current generation is not willing to forego their right and opportunities for a disproportionate access to opportunities and jobs to those whose ancestors contributed to the Bengali liberation. That means that gradually the identity and ideology over which Bangladesh was created on the basis of ethnic identity seems to be peaking, and perhaps the current generation wants a more pragmatic, more fair, and more equitable share in opportunities and jobs, rather than giving a disproportionate share to those who created Bangladesh.
Correct.
So that's a very significant, I think, aspect of Bangladeshi politics. Second feature is more interesting, that those who are leading and spearheading this anti-quota movement belong to both spectrums of the ideological divide.
Correct.
Both Jamaat-e-Islami, which represents the religious right, and the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party, which belong to the left of center and nationalist forces, are equally demanding that the quota reserved for those whose families and ancestors contributed to Bengali freedom movement needs to be done away with. And the third factor is more worrying, I would say. And that is that despite the Supreme Court verdict and the issuance of Gazette notification that 93% quota would be given on the basis of merit, only 7% would be remaining for those who had anything to do with creation of Bangladesh. The riots and the killing is not subsiding, and those who are leading these riots and protests are not very trustworthy, and they say that we will not end our protests till we see these announcements put into practice, which is worrying the government. And it has announced that it will continue to arrest. I think 4,500 people have been arrested so far, and the government is promising more drastic measures against them. So I think this situation will take some time to subside, but I think there are some very interesting and useful lessons for the students of history and the Bengali politics.
Just one passing comment. Besides this job quota, that's the trigger that erupted into this whole chaos. It also has something to do with continued authoritarian form of government by Sheikh Hasina Wajid, and even the founder of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who in 1975, if I remember correctly, tried to create a one-party state and abolished all political parties and created such kind of authoritarian political system that suffocated people, and somehow it created that landscape that now burst open.
So that brings me to home. That what's the most significant developments on the political front in Pakistan, Murtaza? You're a keen watcher and observer of what is most significant.
Well, the continued tension and hostility of PTI against the current government, and especially focused against the armed forces and their leadership, is still on. Although Mr. Khan just said that, the current government is trying to pitch armed forces against PTI, and it won't succeed, as if there is a lot of warmth and affection between PTI and the armed forces.
But I want you to consider another aspect as part of your analysis of this very interesting subject. On one hand, you notice that PTI and their social media accounts continue to wage an information war against army.
Yes, and
But on the other side, the narrative of its leadership is that we will not talk to the politicians, we'll talk only to the army or the establishment. Don't you think these, what they say and what they do are self-contradictory?
they are, and they can't even figure out what to do. On one hand, they say that, this is our country and these are our armed forces. On the other hand, their leadership, especially incarcerated Imran and the overseas social media leadership of PTI, they continue blasting armed forces and their leadership. So that's a clear contradiction that anybody can see. They try to somehow explain it, they try somehow to defend it, but it's indefensible, including this new twist, Mr. Khan saying, the current government is trying to pitch us against armed forces. Well, it's not the current government and the parties comprising the current government who attacked military installations and intel apparatus and public buildings. It was PTI. So, and that's on tape, the video, the audio, the pictures, everything. So they themselves are in a dilemma of sorts. But I think people of Pakistan are wise and sane enough to understand, as long as this duplicit policy continues, I don't think there is no future for this party.
Mr. Saab, thank you so much for joining us for another very candid, bold, and original perspective on global, regional, and domestic developments. Viewers, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of this week. Keep watching and visiting this program, and don't forget to share your feedback and suggestions as well. Thank you so much for joining us.